Among the most troubling side effects of the pandemic is the surge in food insecurity. What that overshadows are the problems with food access before the pandemic and likely continuing into recovery. That's why a food relief organization, Project Bread, is supporting new ways to help people with the most needs, including state legislation for universal school meals. To tell us about the efforts is the Senior Director of Government Affairs for Project Bread, Jennifer Lemmerman. Thank you very much for being with us, Jennifer.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to be here.
Jennifer, I want to start with one of the basics here. And that is what food insecurity means, and I guess why it's worse now during the pandemic.
Sure. Yeah. So food insecurity is sort of defined as the state of being without reliable access to a sufficient quantity of nutritious and affordable food. And so, there are different ways that that's measured. The federal government measures it, and when we look at those numbers, we're seeing just a huge spike around COVID-19. So it was too high prior to the pandemic at 9% in Massachusetts. It's now 18%. And when you add kids into the mix, it's 20% for households that have children. 20% of households with kids are now food insecure. And what we're seeing is also troubling trend amongst those numbers is that the racial disparities are also a major factor. As of October, 1 in 6 white households with children versus 1 in 3 Black households and 1 in 4 Latino households were food insecure. So there are certain communities within the state that are really experiencing this crisis at an increased level. So this is something. It's a number of factors. People lost their jobs. The economic toll of this pandemic has been huge, and it has these far-reaching effects. And what we know is that when household budgets get tight, food is one of the first places to get squeezed. And we're really seeing that play out here with these numbers.
Well, people can still get maybe plenty of calories, but also be very deprived in terms of nutritious food. What are the consequences of that?
The consequences of food insecurity in the long term, you see it. The most vulnerable is certainly children. The long-term consequences of food insecurity on children, it's in their education, in their ability to develop and learn, and in their health. But you do see it across all ages. There's a strong tie between food insecurity and long-term conditions like diabetes and heart disease. So, it's not just sort of the acute getting through the day that people are dealing with. There are certainly long-term health consequences as well.
I know we're focused mainly in the Boston area, but anything about new trends from the federal government, especially about what's going to happen in the future?
Yeah, so we've seen the federal government respond to this crisis in various ways. One of which is some waivers from the USDA that have allowed for the school meal sites that folks have probably seen throughout their community, that every child in Massachusetts and across the country right now, 0 to 18, can get a free breakfast or lunch. And that's meant to be in place of the school meals that they would be getting when they are in school. So we've seen sort of that response. Pandemic EBT is another support that has been put in place, which is an EBT SNAP style card that has the dollar amount that is meant to replace meals that kids would have gotten when they were in school, so that their families can go and purchase food so that they can have that extra nutritional support. In just the last few weeks since the new administration came in, we've also seen several steps taken to try to address this increasing crisis across the country. There was an executive order just a few days into the new administration that directs the USDA to increase many of those supports, not only the pandemic EBT benefits increasing, but also pushing them to look into how they can, pushing his administration to look into how they can continue to support people throughout the duration of this crisis.
During the pandemic, some of the eligibility procedures have been waived for people as far as getting food access from schools. And now you are supporting legislation to sort of keep that going into the future. Now, I'm imagining a situation in which people who need it will certainly benefit from the help, but theoretically, at least, it could go to people who don't need it. So how much of a problem is that?
So right now, as I mentioned, every kid has access to a meal. 0 to 18 can go to any meal site. Doesn't not have to prove that they have the need. They don't have to fill out paperwork, and they can pick up a meal. This was done on the federal level and implemented on the state level as an acknowledgement that children who are experiencing a crisis at a very base level need to be fed. We need to provide children with the nutrition to get through the day. The thing that we know at Project Bread, and many know, is that this was a crisis prior to the pandemic. The food insecurity rate was a crisis in our state and continues to be. School meals, these sites have been a top resource for these families. When polled when surveyed about where they get support, it's SNAP and it's these school meal sites. So this is a barrier that has been up for decades, and we've always been told that it's the way it is and it can't come down, that kids need to be categorized into one of three groups based on their family need. And we believe this barrier can't be let back up. The old system, it wasn't working. Kids who were eligible for free and reduced price meals were experiencing cost and stigma barriers that were keeping them from participating. And then what we also know is that of the food insecure children in this state, 27% of them don't qualify for free or reduced price meals at all. So to think about, who needs it versus who doesn't need it, we were in a system that made those categories, and kids were falling through the cracks.
What about access to SNAP benefits? Because there were problems there even before the pandemic. There were eligibility requirements that left many people out, including many working people. And then on the other hand, you just have, the bureaucratic tension that goes on in applying for benefits as well. Is there anything that should be done about those?
Yeah, so in the short term, the part of the pandemic response has been to waive several of the requirements around application, such as interviews and things like that. In the longer term, though, what we know is that a lot of people don't know about SNAP. They don't know what it is, or some of the other nutrition programs that are available to them. We work in community health centers at Project Bread, and what we're seeing is that 40% of Medicaid patients we are working with have not heard of SNAP. And so they can't know that they qualify for this, and they can't access it if they don't even know it's there. So there's a lot of public education that can be done and that Project Bread is working on to outreach into the communities. There's also a perception that if you sign up for SNAP, that you're taking it away from someone else. And that's just not the case. This is a program that is meant to scale up and to meet the needs of everyone who qualifies for it. So again, that really speaks to the need for outreach. And how help is provided really matters. There's a desire for confidentiality and for services to be provided in language other than English. So, one of the ways that people can do that is by calling the food source hotline at Project Bread, which is totally confidential, comprehensive support for people to find out about what programs they might qualify for, explore those options, and get connected to food resources in their communities.
The state also has a program called Healthy Incentives, which I think benefits growers as well. The governor wants to cut the budget for that. What's the effect of that, do you think?
Yeah, so HIP is the Healthy Incentives Program, known as HIP. It's a very important program for residents who rely on SNAP for food each month, and it allows them to take those SNAP dollars and they go further when used to purchase fresh local food. So that is one that Project Bread strongly supports, and through our food source hotline, we help folks who are on SNAP access that extra benefit. The governor's budget proposal did propose a 60% cut to that program from what it was last year. And what that will do is it will just severely limit the number of people who can take advantage of that program. And it also, as you said, does benefit growers to be able to have those people able to purchase their product.
Well, the first thing many of us think of when we hear Project Bread is about the Walk for Hunger. It's one of those big public gatherings that we can't do anymore until things get better with the pandemic. So you're doing it virtually this year. So what should people know about if they want to help?
Yeah, so we would love to have everyone sign up, create a team, walk as an individual, whatever makes the most sense for you. And as you said, it is virtual. While we love gathering on the common together every year, this does, perhaps give people some opportunity who may not have been able to make that trip into Boston, do it right there in their communities. So you can sign up at projectbread.org. It can be a fun way to get together to go out with your family family and to walk in your neighborhood and to support a really important cause.
Finally, if people need some help with food and they need some information about how to get that, is there a number they can call? I think you have a hotline, don't you?
We do. The food source hotline, it's 800-645-8333. Serve anybody in Massachusetts. It's completely confidential. And as I mentioned, available in 180 languages. And we can, work with anyone to identify where they can get some support.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you.
Jennifer Lemmerman from Project Bread. We'll have more news in just a moment.